I want to go through a couple more examples of distributive property. In this first one, notice that we've got three terms within the parentheses. This is called a polynomial, and when there's three terms, it's called a trinomial. The ones that we've been working previously, so for example, if I just write one, say I have 2 times the quantity of x plus 4. This is called a binomial because there's two terms. So you'll often see binomials, but sometimes you'll see trinomials. And if you have more than 3 terms, we call it a polynomial. Okay, so like this one here, we would multiply the 2 to each term. We're going to do the same thing with this 5, except that we're going to be multiplying it to the 3 terms. And again, you want to consider the sign that is in front of each term. So 5 times a positive x is 5x. 5 times a negative y is a negative 5y. And 5 times a positive z is plus 5z, or positive 5z. Okay? Now, another example is something like this. Say we have 3 times the quantity of 2x minus 4y. What's different about this one is that these terms are made up of variables that have coefficients. So coefficient is a number that is multiplied to a variable, and they're kind of stuck together. So the 2 is called the coefficient, and of course the x is the variable. In this case, we're going to multiply the numbers first and then the variable. And I'll show you. So 3 times 2 is 6x, and I'll go ahead and write it out. So 3 times 2, and then the x, and then 3 times negative 4, so that's going to be minus 3 times 4y. So here we've got 6x, and then negative 3 times 4 is negative 12y. Okay, you might see some examples of this. One other example I want to go over is when you have an exponent with associated with a variable. So let's say we have 2 times 3x squared minus 1. Okay, again, we're going to multiply the 2 and the 3 first, so that's going to be 2 times 3x squared, and then 2 times negative 1, which is going to be, I'll write it out, 1. So then simplify, we've got 2 times 3 is 6x squared minus 2. Notice the x squared didn't really change because we're not multiplying this variable by another variable x. Let me give you an example of that real quick. Let's say we've got x times the quantity of x plus 1. Like before, we're just going to take this factor and we're going to multiply it to each part. So x times x, and I'll write it out first, plus x times 1. Now, think about what x times x is. That's going to be the same thing as x squared. Notice it's not 2x. When you're adding x's, like x plus x, then you would have 2x. But because you're multiplying the x's, you're going to have an exponent. So x squared plus 1x is the same thing as x. We don't normally write the 1. Okay, so let's try one more, last one. Say we've got x times 2x squared minus 4x plus 3. Okay, so this is the hardest one. Again, we're going to take that x and multiply it to each part. So we don't have a coefficient here, but you can assume that's a 1. So 1 times 2 is 2. X times x squared. That's going to be x times x times x, which is 2x cubed. And then here we've got a positive times a negative 4, so that'd be a minus 4, and that's x times x, which is going to be 4x squared, excuse me. And then we have positive 1 times positive 3, so that's a positive 3x. We need to include that x. So I'm just going to write it down like that. Okay? This one, probably won't see too many of those, if any, on the homework, but I wanted to give you an example. We'll look at some of these types of problems later in the quarter.